Sorry, folks. Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Thursday, September 27th, 2018. Once again, apologize for the audio issue that I'm having, apparently. Our solar wind speeds are sitting at 425.6 kilometers with a density of 6.2. And I was looking at our sun, and we are blank once again. Now, this is 14 straight days without a sunspot. And I wanted to show you guys this. Right now, we don't have anything cooking either. So, curious to see how much longer that we will see this spotless streak continue, as right now it sits at 14, and it could continue into the foreseeable future for a long period of time. KP indices are sitting at 2, and 24-hour max is at a 3. And this is the SDO right now. We'll take a look at it in motion. We don't see any sunspot activity at this time. And there is a slight coronal hole development right here. Not yet Earth facing, but still nothing major. But I did want to point something else out real quick. And I'll wait till this restarts to the beginning here. Here we go. Take a look right here, guys, in this little circled area. No, that is not a stellar core next to the sun. But what it is a filament release here. And it's being hurled right at us now, accordingly, in the northern part of our magnetosphere, so it's not going to really affect us much. But I wanted to show you guys this image, and you even see the satellite shake seconds after this release. Watch it right here once again. So an interesting little development there with a filament release today as it was hurled in our direction, but will not have a direct impact of any kind because of its location. So, but this is just part of the things of a minimum sun does. And thought I'd share that with you today. Again, not a stellar core next to the sun. Taking a look at our TSI reading for today. Actually, this is for September 16th, 2018. Our TSI has dropped a little bit to a 1360.65. Now, it's been hovering around the 0.7 region for quite some time, and here recently is starting to show a little bit of declining action. However, very, very, very minimal. Let's go ahead and get into some headlines. The rapid cyclogenesis in the Mediterranean Sea, metacane Zobras, is forming, threatening Greece and Turkey. In a response to the Arctic outbreak that pushed into the southern Balkan Peninsula, a cold core upper low is deepening in the southern central Mediterranean, and cyclonegenesis is taking place. It will lead into the formation of tropical-like cyclone metacane by evening. And taking a look at a couple of radar images of the storm, it's getting its act together. We've been kind of warning about this for a few days. Have we seen it on severeweather.eu? And here is now another warning once again from the watchers, is it will make impact at some point. Now, model guidance is now trending towards a more southerly track of metacane than what was anticipated in yesterday's model runs. And as we see here in the bottom of our screen, the track here is going to just miss Athens. It's going to go just to the south of Athens, but make landfall near the town of Izmir, and other inland towns will also be affected. Right now, it looks like Bursa, Istanbul, Turkey by Sunday is possible. It says the metacane may even hit Crete on late Saturday and southwest Turkey on Sunday after nearing Penelope's earlier. Severe wind and life-threatening flash floods threat are expected in some areas. And thanks again to the watchers for a very well report here on what's going to happen. This is the total accumulation of rain that is expected to fall in the region. And we see some gray areas, which is between 100 and 200 millimeters of rain. The maximum amount of rain looks like around 389 to 400 millimeters, which is right around the 15-inch mark of rain in the 400 millimeters. So we'll keep our eyes on that storm with any updates that we can get. An exceptionally rare first September tropical cyclone since 1950 forms in the southwest Pacific. Tropical storm Luia. Tropical cyclone, I should say, Luia, formed in the southwest Pacific Ocean on September 26, 2018, as the first named storm of the 2018-19 South Pacific tropical cyclone season. This is the first tropical cyclone to form in the southwest Pacific during the month of September since Tropical Cyclone 02P on September 12, 1950, 68 years ago. The season officially starts on November 1st and ends at April 30th. It says here now, Chris Brandolino said that Luia comes even before forecasters have put together their cyclone outlook for the region, due to be published next month, by the way. He says it's very unusual. In fact, this is the first tropical cyclone to form in the month of September, going back to 50, which we already mentioned. Here is the track of this storm. Nowhere to be made landfall at any time. In fact, the cone of uncertainty is very wide here in the next several days. But still, worth mentioning when you haven't seen a storm like this form in the Southwest Pacific in over 68 years. Leave the link in the description. You guys can check that out. It's been an active Pacific season, that's for sure. And more news to talk about, too, with Pacific. Some very eye-raising news, actually. Tropical storm Kirk nearing Lesser Antilles may pass the south or over Martinique. Tropical storm Kirk continues moving west over the Atlantic towards the Lesser Antilles. Its center may pass over Martinique by the end of the day. Tropical storm warnings in effect for Barbados, St. Lucia, Dominica, Martinique, and Guadeloupe, while tropical storm watch in effect for St. Vincent and Grenadines. Interest elsewhere in the central and northern Lesser Antilles should monitor the progress of Kirk. Now, this storm had died and turned into nothing and has now reemerged as is nearing waters that are more favorable for also hurricane conditions, not only moving into waters that are more favorable, but also, and boy, look at the tropical storm that is above that. That is the storm that's in the middle of the Atlantic right now. I think it's Leslie, and it's just a tropical depression right now, but that thing is huge, and it's just sitting right now dwelling in the Atlantic Ocean. But what I also want to mention, too, about this storm is that it's also running away from the grasp of the Sahara Desert with its dust forecast here. As you see in this particular region, we are still it's the storm right now is actually heading out of this motion of Saharan desert sand that is reaching parts now near the Caribbean and heading towards Central America. But as you can tell, the lighter brown is very light. It's not going to have the impact on lessening a storm, say as the plume of sand that's coming behind it. That would definitely have an effect on any kind of moisture or a storm that would be trying to develop at this point. So I wanted to point that out as well really quick. Leave the link in the description, and let's move on to, Typhoon Trami has weakened, but it is expected to hit Okinawa Islands with a Cat 2 or 3 strength on September 28th, which is tomorrow. Now, this thing was a super typhoon last weekend, and has weakened due to interaction with less favorable seawaters and more shear closer to Asia this week. However, this very large typhoon is still very impressive in satellite imagery. Trami is expected to cross the Ryukyu Islands and make a very close pass to Okinawa on Saturday at a Cat 2 or Cat 3. Now, the Ryukyu Islands have been in the news for the last 2 months with torrential downpours. So again, here is another storm in another area that does not need the potential flooding rains here. And this storm has definitely weakened, but still an oppressive typhoon. It's no longer a super typhoon. We've got sustained winds right around 73 miles per hour. And here is our track of this storm as it does head up and curl towards Japan and looks to make landfall with a decent amount. So still not done with this storm. It has weakened some. Central pressure right now sitting at 967, but it is predicted to drop once again. So we will keep our eyes on this very closely. Trami will be moving just over Okinawa on Saturday. Depending on the position of the island could get hit very hard if the strongest eastern part of the eye wall hits the area. Hurricane force winds, storm surge, and flash floods would be devastating. Indeed, it would be. And this is the worst case scenario here with this storm. Completely engulfs the islands. Peak winds are going to be around 200 kilometers per hour. New typhoon forming further southeast of Trami, which could potentially become another storm typhoon next week. Again, we were dealing with Mancut, turned into a super typhoon, and now Trami, and now we're talking about another one next week. Rainfall sums up more than 800 millimeters of rainfall is possible through Sunday. That's 31.46 inches of rain. I looked it up. So we will keep our eyes once again, another giant storm bringing a ton of rain to Japan and the Asia area. This is now the third big typhoon that we've seen come through this area, plowed through the Philippines. Hong Kong's been hit. Thankfully, the storm is veering away from that same area, but unfortunately, Japan, which had a few weeks off from the chaos, is now once again back in the basically bullseye of this storm right now, and it does look like it's going to make landfall a couple of different times. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've said before in the past. This might be a repeat story here, but this was wrote originally August 9th, 2018. And I really reread this and thought about this a lot. And this, to me, should be infuriating to everyone, global warming and global cooling communities. And the reason why I say this is because I do believe that there are some people who are misinformed and like a good debate and do have what they think is evidence, and they have a decent time arguing what they think is fact with a climate skeptic who does not agree with one who thinks man controls warming. But now we have the BBC, which is saying they've told their staff no longer to need to invite climate change deniers. I'm going to call them skeptics, though. I don't like this whole denier thing, because I think there's a difference here between climate change deniers and climate change skeptics. And the difference is a climate change skeptic is someone who is questioning the science of what climate change is really, is what the consensus is saying is causing climate change, versus climate deniers. Climate change deniers could be people who deny that our climate is changing and are just really downplaying the whole situation, saying, oh, we're not global warming or global cooling, it's just weather, it happens. So to me, there's a difference. I don't fall under that climate change denier. I am a climate change skeptic. And I feel like that I have a very valid reason to be a skeptic based on the fact that this channel and the science that we cover doesn't quite line up with people in the anthropogenic global warming crowd. But reading on, it says, it has also asked all editorial staff to take a course on how to report on climate change, said that its coverage of the topic is wrong too often. Interesting. New BBC editorial policy on climate change states to achieve impartiality, you do not need to include outright deniers of climate change in BBC coverage. In the same way you would not have someone denying that Manchester United won 2-0 last Saturday, the referee has spoken. The referee has spoken. So basically, folks, what they're saying is that man-made global warming is the score on the scoreboard, and that's that. In other words, anyone who's a climate skeptic is not allowed to question these people that believe that man has something to do with climate change. I'll go on reading here. April Ofcom ruled that the Today program on Radio 4 had breached broadcasting rules by not sufficiently challenging Lord Lawson of Blaby, the former Conservative Chancellor of the Exchequer and a climate change skeptic, over claims that he made in an interview. Lord Lawson is the founder of Global Warming Policy Foundation, a climate skeptic think tank The director of the foundation said that the new BBC policy was basically telling editors, don't touch the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Fran Unsworth, the BBC's director of news and current affairs, emailed its journalists this week asking them to book a place on a 1-hour course that covers the latest science, policy research, and misconceptions to challenge, giving you confidence to cover climate change accurately and knowledgeably. So basically what the BBC is telling its reporters is that, look, you need to go and digest this garbage that we're going to feed you and force it down your throat so you can force it down the masses' throats. That's what this is saying. The email leaked to the website Carbon Brief, which seeks to raise awareness of the threat of climate change, referred staff to a crib sheet that includes the new policy. The policy says climate change has been a difficult subject for the BBC, and we get coverage of it wrong too often. The climate change science community is clear that humans have changed the climate, but specifically how to more difficult to the evidence. So basically they're admitting that they don't have the evidence to prove this. They just say it a lot, but they don't have a specific answer for how man changes the climate. A section entitled "What's the BBC's Position" says that man-made climate change exists. If the science proves it, we should report it. The science doesn't prove that man-made global warming or climate change is real. You people just spout out regurgitated commentary from Al Gore and Michael Mann and Bill Nye, the science guy. You guys just regurgitate because those are big names and those consensus should all just fall in line. Policy adds that there may be occasions to hear from a denier, but only with appropriate challenge from the knowledgeable interviewer. So basically, if you didn't take that course, then you're not going to be able to confront a denier because you weren't coached on how to overcome objections of a climate denier. Basically, that's what that is. This is like a sales training for a company that has a bunch of salesmen that can't sell, so they have to teach them how to cheat, basically. And that happens a lot, folks. It also, I already read that. The document says the BBC journalists need to be aware that the guest's viewpoint and how to challenge it effectively. Basically telling its broadcasters, look, you need to realize how to overcome this person's objectives. We can't look stupid. The Global Warming Policy Foundation does not disclose who funds it. Benny Pazer, the foundation's director, said that Lord Lawson has been invited to the Today program only twice in the past 5 years, and on both occasions, complaints from campaigners had resulted in the BBC apologizing. He added the memo puts in writing what most people have known for the past 10 years, which is that anyone skeptical of climate alarmism isn't allowed on the BBC. They cherry pick the people who make claims. No one is allowed to counter their own bias. The BBC is taking a position on a very controversial issue. Climate change is real and humans are contributing to it, but it's not as alarming as the BBC very often makes it out to be. Just that last comment there at the end about how real climate change is by humans is just more of the same. It's almost like this person's trying to be centered somehow with his stance on climate change. Again, I don't think anyone in this group denies climate change. We disagree with the concept of how climate change is happening. Is what we agree. Climate is changing. Absolutely. We're going from a warmer climate to a much colder climate. That's the change. And then the secondary to that is, how is that caused? Carbon taxes for dummies. Given the amount of misinformation being generated by politicians, pollsters, pundits, think tanks, and other think about carbon taxes, let's discuss what is true and what isn't. Carbon taxes raise taxes. True. He gives a little explanation. He says carbon tax makes big polluters pay. That is false, and I'll read why he says that. A carbon tax makes all of us pay because we buy goods and services that big polluters create through the use of fossil fuel energy, meaning oil, coal, and natural gas. These big polluters then pass along their increased cost to us as higher taxes or prices, typically with additional financial help from the government, meaning us, so they don't bolt to jurisdictions which don't have a national carbon tax like the United States. It says all carbon taxes are alike. That's false. Cap and trade, a carbon tax by another name, is the worst form of carbon tax because of its lack of financial transparency. The best is carbon-free and dividend, a revenue-neutral carbon tax recently proposed by Canadians for a Clean Prosperity, headed by a former Stephen Harper policy director, Mark Cameron. A revenue-neutral carbon tax returns the money raised to Canadian households in the form of equal dividend checks or income tax cuts, is what they're saying. Carbon fee and dividend means, as Canadians for Clean Prosperity claims, that the vast majority of households, regardless of income level, would receive more money in the form of carbon dividend checks than they would pay in carbon taxes. False, in a sense of being unrealistic. Revenue-neutral carbon fee and dividend, assuming Prime Minister Justin Trudeau doesn't snatch the money back from us directly or indirectly, a big assumption, would leave about 2/3 of households financially better off and 1/3 worse off because lower income families buy fewer energy consuming goods and services that higher income ones do. And just an interesting article to read about the carbon tax in Canada. I know we have a lot of listeners who are from Canada, and I also know that here lately there's been a lot of news being made about some of these people actually pulling out of these climate plans. And the support for Justin Trudeau, in my opinion, it seems like it's always been kind of not high for him. Most people don't like him across the border, and there's a lot of people that are in Canada that don't care for him either. And a lot of lawmakers are also jumping off of this climate change. Now, I've seen a lot of headlines in Canada where they're trying to get rid of some of these carbon taxes, and they're not on board with these Paris Agreement climate targets. A lot of these lawmakers throughout the provinces of Canada are just not buying it. Alberta, BC, Ottawa, you guys are all starting to smarten up to this so-called carbon tax and how it's our fault. Well, let's go to this real quick. I wanted to talk about, I got to go back to this real quick because, well, maybe not. I don't know. I don't want to rant really too much about it other than the fact that I just find it, how can anybody with logic and common sense go for this new policy that the BBC has now about climate deniers and climate change skeptics? How can anybody that can say that they're a logical and common sense person actually look at this as a fair and balanced way of reporting on the climate? And what it is that they're finding out that the climate skeptics are smarter than the people talking about global warming made by man. That's the biggest problem. All right, I'll move on. And thanks to Rob, I was talking to him about this in a chat the other day, and I thought this was very important because WKBW in Buffalo posted out another outlandish claim about the climate and everything like that. Well, their claim was that don't go to Iceland anytime soon, folks, because it's about to blow. And the person that wrote the study about the CO2 atmospheric release is a little upset that the tabloids are turning this into fear porn. Despite screaming headlines in the British tabloids and even the normally Sunday Times, there is no sign that Iceland's Katla volcano will erupt anytime soon, scientists say. The wild headlines warn that the Icelandic giant is about to erupt, and scientists warn huge Iceland volcano is about to erupt, and it could be even dwarf the 2010 ash cloud coverage. The stories were based on a recent scientific study that said that Katla volcano is globally important to the source of atmospheric carbon dioxide, one of the main greenhouse gases responsible for global warming. Wrong. According to the study's lead author, and did not say whether the volcano was nearing eruption, especially one that could cause widespread disruption of European air travel. I said explicitly, and this is the person who wrote the study about this, about the increasing gases. She says, I said explicitly that we are in no position to say whether or not Katla volcano is ready to erupt, and that air traffic disruption in case of an eruption is unlikely to be as serious as in 2010. She goes on to say that they go on to talk about the Katla volcano is located in southwestern Iceland, not far from the infamous, I am not going to try to pronounce that, Eyjafjallajokull volcano. Really? Anyone that could pronounce this correctly, send it to me in a video message, and I don't know, maybe we'll throw you a Grand Solar Minimum sticker, because that's crazy. It was incredibly disappointing to see what the Sunday Times have gone down the route of trashy tabloids. According to the author of the study, the article misinforms the readers and undermines me as a scientist and a specialist in my field. Shameful job, she says. Well, I would agree with you there if you wouldn't have said this at the bottom. Overall, however, the real shame here is that the true version of the story is already very important and interesting itself. We discovered something totally unexpected, mind-blowing about Katla volcano, and the discovery may help forecast its eruptions better in the future. That's not what I wanted to tell. Oh, it's up here. Sorry. She did clarify that all world's volcanoes combined emit less than 2% of the CO2 emissions from human activities. So there should be no suggestion that climate change due to greenhouse gases emissions could be caused by volcanoes rather than human activities. So your credibility was not affected by the fear porn artist that said that this thing was going to blow. She said, this article misinforms their readers and undermines me as a scientist and a specialist in my field. No, what undermines you as a specialist in your field and a scientist is this outlandish claim that you make here at the back, clarifying that the combined world volcanoes emit less than 2% of the CO2 emissions, of 2% of the CO2 emissions from human activities. Less than 2%. Now, all of us, we already know that our man-made CO2, if any contribution, is a 0.004%. So this lady is a scientist and an expert in her so-called field. Here I'm defending her in one breath because she's saying it's not going to blow, which is absolutely true. It's not a matter of when, but if it blows, which they have no way of knowing when, and they can't tell you when. They're not specialists in this field like she claims. But telling us all here that the world's volcanoes combined emit less than 2% of 0.004% of our CO2 emissions. That's what she's saying. So if you're someone who's in the global warming community, just know that she's saying that the world volcanoes, I think everybody that follows any kind of science knows that world volcanoes emit way more CO2 than what this woman is suggesting right here. That is where we undermine you as a scientist and a specialist in your qualified field. Shameful should be added and pointed towards you for this outlandish claim that volcanoes combined emit less than 2% of the CO2 emissions from human activity. Jesus. Woo! It gets better every day. And it's not just from the global warming people, but you've got people in our community that like to hype up weather and blame it on, you guessed it, grand solar minimum. A natural cold front is dipping down across the United States late this month into October. And we have people out there titling it grand solar minimum. Question mark. No, it's fall. We get it. It's going to be colder this winter and the winters to come. Yes. But I wish that we could get some balance out there from people who say they're experts or they're avid followers of the topic. Yet they want to blame every snowflake, every hail ball, every cold front on the grand solar minimum. And I think I've made it very clear about this channel. A, we report on stories that matter to the grand solar minimum. And B, the grand solar minimum is not something you're going to see overnight. So you can't sit here and collect all these cold fronts and all these snowstorms and say grand solar minimum. You can't do it. That's just retarded. Sorry. You can't do it. And so it's not just the warming crowd that sensationalizes. We got it over here in the Grand Solar Minimum community too, where people like to blame every little thing that deals with cold weather on the Grand Solar Minimum. How about we got an ENSO cycle going on right now? We got a very bizarre situation right now. And, talking with Rob, I'm kind of with him on this. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I don't mean to put you out there like that, Rob. Sorry, buddy. This reading right here is very peculiar. We're sitting right now in the El Nino region at a 0.665. Now, folks, you guys have watched this with me all year long, since April, through the summer. It's been slowly declining, as you see right here, and then just all of a sudden, we have almost seen a full degree increase in the El Nino 3-4 index. And within a week, we haven't seen more than 0.2 of a value change in the temperature in that region in 3 or 4 months. And just in 1 week, we see a value rise of 0.665 above. Yeah, it's an El Nino right now. And it's right here. But just really, really weird. Like, it was almost like the real data was not pleasing the people who were forecasting El Nino now, like your AccuWeather and your Weather Channel, how they push El Nino, it's here, it's here. They've been saying it all summer long, and now those same forecasters are probably laughing, like, I told you. Or is this another case of numbers failing us? Are they being messed with? Is the satellite glitching out? I mean, strange. Almost a full degree Celsius in 7 to 10 days, when we haven't seen but maybe 10 to 0.30 temperature drop at most since July. Again, folks, Grand Solar Minimum is upon us. It's beginning. But I'm not going to sit here and tell everyone every time we get a major snowstorm, Grand Solar Minimum, told you, Grand Solar Minimum. And to me, somebody who has to keep saying that over and over again, it just feels like it's the same thing of trying to manipulate the masses. You're pounding it in. Snow, Grand Solar Minimum. Hail, Grand Solar Minimum. You're pounding it in. You're blaming every single weather. No, I know we report stories every day that talk about floods, snow, hail, all that, severe weather, purple skies. But we try to make a connection to elements that matter to the Grand Solar Minimum. When we talk about these storms that drop 30 to 40 inches of rain, we talk about the abundance of cosmic rays that are in the atmosphere that are combining with water vapor and other particles in our atmosphere that are already naturally there, and that is intensifying the amount of rain that falls. When we talk about hail, we talk about the reason why, again, cosmic ray influx. When we talk about cold fronts, we don't necessarily talk about Grand Solar Minimum. We just say, here comes a cold front. And right now, it's September going into October, and this is about the time of the year where we start to see things start turning in the weather. Nothing unusual, folks. Now, we do have some snow coming. I'll get to that just here in a second. One more article I want to cover before we get into the weather, and it's a new book. This physicist says evidence of human role in climate is lacking. And I think this is one where I wanted to read off. Yes, so here we go. I'm going to read this as much as I can real quick. In a new book from physicist Ralph B. Alexander, Science Under Attack, The Age of Unreason, he sees abuse in science. Excerpts from the book. Evidence and logic are lacking in many areas of public debate today on hot-button issues ranging from dietary fat to vaccination. The Science Under Attack, Dr. Alexander shows how science is being abused, sidelined, or ignored, making it difficult or impossible for the public to form a reasoned opinion about important issues. That is 125% correct. Just like the article I just showed you about the volcano in Katla, where the scientist is telling you that CO2 emissions are greater from man than it is from earthquakes and volcanoes. And then you go to our channel and we tell you the opposite. So what do you believe? So I agree with that statement 120%. Conventional scientific wisdom holds that global warming and consequent changes in the climate are primarily our own doing. But what few people realize is the actual scientific evidence for a substantial human contribution to climate change is flimsy. It requires highly questionable computer climate models to make the connection between global warming and human emissions of carbon dioxide. No proof warming is human-caused. The multiple lines of evidence which do exist are simply evidence that the world is warming, not proof that the warming comes from human activity. That supposed proof relies entirely on computer models that attempt to simulate the Earth's highly complex climate and include greenhouse gases as well as aerosols from both volcanic and man-made sources, but almost totally ignore the natural variability. Models way off the mark, so it shouldn't be surprising that models have a dismal track record in predicting the future. Most spectacular, the models failed to predict the recent pause or hiatus in global warming from the late 1990s to about 2014. This part is important to me because with the CO2 levels continuing to rise through the 90s into 2014, where is our temperature rise? They keep going up. CO2 is going up, up. But yet there is a 24-year pause in warming. Hiatus. One other thing I want to mention about this article. This 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit, by the way, folks. So when NOAA says that we're at that 1.5 degree temperature, where the science are supposed to flip out when it gets to 2, so that's in Fahrenheit. What is that in Celsius? 0.9. Here's my connection. They are attacking this number right here, and I will move me out of the way to show you what I am talking about. Very top here. Back in February of 2016, not this one, I'll get that one out of there. 2016, we had a reading Celsius now, 0.88, 2016, which is what? 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So scientists are referring to this number here. This is where they are worried that we're tipping the point of the catastrophic global climate change because of that reading right there. But what they're ignoring is the rest of the data since 2016. And it's showing we are not going to head back towards that temperature and dice. In fact, here in less than a week, we will now know the results for September, as August was a 0.19 degrees Celsius above baseline. Any takes on bets for what it's going to be in September? I'll go out on a limb. I thought August was a hot month for it to drop the way it did. September started off just as hot, but I think after that, it kind of leveled off to average. But, you know, here's where we get caught up in the predictions. I was right, you were wrong. We can sit here and make predictions all day long. I think the data is going to be the best predictor here of what's happening. And unless we get some kind of sudden spike in lower global atmospheric anomalies, it's going to continue to drop. Maybe it goes back up a little bit. But I don't think we're going to be in for the big surprise like we were in August. I don't think it's going to be a deepest drop. It may drop maybe down to a 0.16. If it goes up, maybe a 0.21. I'd be shocked if it was over 30. But, you know, these numbers every month, I know a couple months ago I predicted it to be a certain stage and it rose. So we'll just continue to watch. It's fun to guess. I think everybody in our group that follows this channel agrees that it's fun to guess. And I'm sure some of you right now in the chat are making your best stabs at it right now. But I wanted to bring that out because this, I finally understood the other day when I was reporting about how NOAA is saying that we're at that 1.5 degree mark and it's almost catastrophic. Now I understand what they're talking about. They're talking about the 0.88 reading that we had in February of 2016. They are talking about the fact that we have hit that mark, but since have declined, and they're ignoring that. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about since that reading, we have dropped almost 7.75 degrees Celsius since that time. fact, if we're being precise here, we've dropped 0.69 degrees. Is it 0.79? No, it's 0.69 degrees Celsius is what we've dropped. Yes. So, again, great article. Thank you. What's Up With That, once again, for covering this article about this book. You guys can check it out here. Amazon, Science Under Attack, The Age of Unreason by Ralph B. Alexander. I recommend everybody giving this a read. Check it out. All right, so let's go to some weather. We talked about cyclonic activity. I wanted to check out Leslie here. Look at that. That thing, that system, thank God, is nothing, but that thing is massive. I mean, it covers almost the entire center of the Atlantic, and the tail of this thing reaches almost the Florida Keys. And that's also driving Kirk to move into this region. That system is pushing down on Kirk to move southwest. So interesting. Some tropical waves coming off of Africa. But again, as I showed you, the dust plume that we have coming off of the coast of Africa, I think will absorb most of that energy. And the temperatures on the oceans are still not really favorable. Here is the tropical Atlantic sea surface temperature anomaly, just barely above baseline. And then we have the North Atlantic. It's kind of steadying right now at a negative 0.714 degrees Celsius below baseline. So not really dropping anymore, just kind of staying put. And then, of course, the El Nino, which is just out of control. And I really think that, there should be some kind of further look into this anomaly reading and what it really means. And is this just a sudden jolt and then we see a gradual decline once again? I don't know. Because the movement of this temperature was striking to me before even speaking to anybody about this. But, certain people I talked to about this confirmed my suspicions as well. But let's take a look at our GFS models, because we got a lot of moisture coming here on the East Coast once again. Talking about the 27th going into Friday of the 28th. We see West Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, chances for showers, but the heavier stuff moving into western Pennsylvania, reaching up into New England this weekend, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, upstate New York, parts of Maine. And then look at this. This weekend, we have chances of snow in Wyoming, northeast Wyoming, and that chance quickly diminishes. But we also see Minnesota with some snow showers possible as well. This is the cold front that a certain individual was blaming the grand solar minimum for. Yeah, that's cold. It's cold. The snow shouldn't be flying just yet. I get you, but I'm sure we can look up some records and we'll see it. Oh, and then we have Hurricane, is this Rosa or Rita? Where's she at? Let me go find her real quick, guys. Sorry about the delay here. I know where she's at. Hold on. Current storms. I want to address her. Hurricane Rosa, 125 knots. Pressure of 1,008 and dropping. Check this out. This is her path right here. And it'll be a tropical storm. It shows hurricane status until 11 a.m. Monday. Turns into a tropical storm. And then as it gets into the Baja area, into New Mexico, I want to check this out. Let's go back to our GFS radar. And let's show you what they have. This is the idea, the thinking right now. But as we move through Friday, chances of snow through northeast Wyoming, rain moving off the East Coast, developing in the North Carolina areas and South Carolina, but moving out by Saturday evening. And check out Rosa, Hurricane Rosa here in your bottom left screen. She's approaching the Baja area on Sunday, September 30th. Meanwhile, we got more snow showers developing in BC, Alberta, just really spread out through Canada on Monday, October 1st. Flakes are flying, but we also have a tropical storm approaching landfall in New Mexico. And this is by Tuesday, October 2nd. Look at that. The storm system has still got it together as it's totally over land, and we see heavy snow also coming into the region. BC, Alberta, watch out. More snow, more moisture. And this is still Tuesday. This is a fast-moving low-pressure system. It goes across the Colorado, Nebraska, the Dakotas, into Minnesota, and then bam, intensifies once again. And there's a cold front just above that, and it's going to grab a hold of that storm system and ride up in the northern plains through the Great Lakes before, by the time it exits throughout Nova Scotia, a line of showers and thunderstorms develop across the Midwest into Indiana and northern Ohio through central Ohio into Thursday, late week next week. And look at all the chances for moisture in Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin, Oklahoma. Again, snow showers in Wyoming as early as October 5th of next week or the following week. And heavy snow showers going into Colorado, the Denver area. Snow above here near Toronto, just above us here in the Great Lakes. And of course, this long line of moisture once again forming across the Midwest into the south, into the southeast, and this again low pressure system moving across off the east coast. And look out, there's another storm heading up through the Baja area, through Mexico, and into New Mexico, into Texas. Now here's where it gets tricky. So we've got this this tropical moisture that could be here in the middle of the country, but look at the cold air behind this storm. The entire state of Wyoming has been getting snow showers flirted with between October 1st and October 5th. And then 4 days after that, we have a major snowstorm developing on October 9th. As that system leaves the East Coast, this system gets its act together and combines with the low pressure out of the Pacific, and snow seems to hang around for at least 24 hours in Wyoming and moving into parts of Colorado before this low pressure system screams off into Canada, bringing snow behind it and more rain chances across, you guessed it, the Midwest, into the Carolinas and out to the East Coast before, if you look to the northwest, another system in BC and Alberta with heavy snow, freezing rain, and lots of precipitation, folks. So a very active beginning to October when it comes to moisture and snow, surprisingly. And let's take a look at our temperatures to get that, actually. And of course, we see the freezing marks in the higher elevations here in the beginning. The end of September, we start to see that cold Arctic air starting to filter down. By the time we get to October 1st, we're still seeing 30s and freezing in Canada. Not quite yet so much widespread in the United States. But that's going to change on and around October 9th. And there we have a bigger pocket of colder Arctic air spilling into the United States. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, lows in the teens on Wednesday, October 10th. As that moves out, we do get a brief, what we call Indian summer, here is the second week of October, and you can see the very sharp line of this cold front that's moving through on the 12th of October. Areas that were 80 degrees on the 11th in October will be 37 degrees in 24 hours after that. So watch out for a drastic temperature reduction between October 10th in the Northeast. We are looking at highs near 74 degrees in Syracuse. And by the 14th, the 13th of October, lows of 38 degrees. So 74 to 38 in 24 to 36 hours. And then, of course, daytime highs don't even make it out of the mid-50s after that. And then if you look at the futurecast here, this is typical daytime highs for October 13th for the Northeast, Ohio, the Northern Plains, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado. And here's another thing that I've noticed too, this pattern that's developed here in the middle of the country, where I thought last winter we saw a lot of warmer temperatures in this region throughout off and on the winter, seeing the colder air here, and the colder air here, already starting to see that set up early in the very early stages of fall. So lots to go over, guys. Lots to still happen. the hurricane situations, the ocean temperature anomalies. We apologize. We've missed a few days. Myself and Mari have been under the weather. This house has gotten hit with something fierce when it comes to colds. Mari is on the mend. She's in the chat tonight. However, still not well enough to speak on the air, and wishing her to get well as soon as possible. But we've missed a few days this week, and it's not that there was nothing to report, because yesterday there was a plethora of things to talk about. But things change so fast, I've noticed. And especially, I think, in 2018, I think we're seeing an acceleration of how fast things actually are changing. And hopefully people understand that this is not just some kind of scare tactic for profit or anything like that. This is a channel that is only interested in reporting about news that's related to grand solar minimum type weather events. And we pick the stories that we think best highlight what to expect on a normal basis. We try not to drive every story that's extreme, but we do try to pick the ones that we feel like that this is the more common things that we're going to see in the years to come. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Please like and share and subscribe if you haven't already do that. And make sure you hit that red bell, because a lot of folks aren't getting notifications. So if you want to get the notifications when we go on live, I normally try to announce a show at least a couple hours before showtime. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Have a good evening, and we will talk soon.